Hello, and welcome to Chapter 9 New Product Development and the Product Lifecycle. So, our case study today talks about Nokia. It's funny because obviously these slides are dated. I use these slides because they do such a good job at explaining the general topics, but the case studies are not necessarily the best. So instead of talking about Nokia, which I think right now Nokia has some work to do on innovation. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, Nokia was on the cutting edge, but right now I would say that would not be my ideal innovation company. Instead, I'm going to talk a little bit about Tesla. And so, when you think of innovation and you think of a company that's cutting edge, you will think of maybe Apple or Tesla. And Tesla, of course, despite the sometimes erratic nature of the CEO, is always talking about whether it's electric cars or it's talking about hydrogen fuel batteries, or they're talking about solar panels, or all types of cutting edge innovations going to outer space. And so when we think of new product development, there's some companies that are really better suited and are much better at this whole new product rollout game. And certainly there are pros and cons. I mean, Tesla hasn't had the best of luck with their truck. But if you use Apple, Apple has really had a successful run in terms of looking at bringing out new products, whether we're talking about the iPhone or the iPod, or we're talking about their MacBooks or their iPad. They've had a good run. So when we're talking about the product life cycle and new product development, I think what is important for us to recognize is that a lot of companies try to develop new products and a lot of companies fail miserably on this front. The reality is 92%, something like between 80 and 90 something percent of all new products fail straight up. They just fail. You see them, they might be able to bring it to market, and then 2 years out, they're gone. Cannot maintain in sales. And so it does require a particular skill set in order to be successful in this market. But the idea of new product development is moving something from just, this fantasy, this idea in someone's mind, all the way through to market and commercialization. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about what are some strategies towards new product development. Whether you are going to obtain this new product through acquisition, or you're going to develop this product from research and development. It almost doesn't matter how you got to the new product stage, but recognizing that there's a lot of failure involved in new products. And one other piece I want to add, one of the other areas that products really suffer from is that people don't understand who the market is. So we have to really move away from this idea of stereotyping products and their audiences. We're not stereotyping products per se, but the audiences that will potentially buy these products. And particularly when a company may think that there's a fad, there is an interest, a group of people, there are a group of people who are really, interested in this product category. They may develop a product that is somewhat stereotypical in nature. For example, I would say a few years ago, Adidas attempted to come out with a product that they called shackle sneakers. Yes, you heard me correctly, ladies and gentlemen. Shackle sneakers was the name of the particular sneaker. I'm going to put up a link to it so you can see the level of ridiculousness that we were talking about. And that was a miserable failure. Once the NAACP found out about it, they had to pull it. I mean, it was a ridiculous idea to begin with. And when they asked the CEO, what the heck were you thinking? He said, well, I think people wanted to really be shackled to fashion. Failed. So the idea is that I think sometimes, you may come up with an idea and it just is not a good idea. So that's why we talk about the stages, right? Idea generation is the first one. And you need a bunch of people in a room who can say, yeah, go for that. Yeah, no, that's not gonna work, right? And so the idea screening stage, anyone can come up with ideas, but you really do have to have someone in the space that understands not all ideas are good ideas, right? And then as you move from there, then you go to concept development and learning. And the concept development and testing here um, is where you learn what aspects, what characteristics, what qualities have the potential to go the distance, and you're testing it out with different potential groups. Yes for this, no for that. Some things that you might have liked in the idea generation stage might have gotten screened out in the idea screening stage. Maybe it came back in the product development and then went again. So this is a lot of testing of the concept, etc., etc. Then you look at marketing strategy, because even though I might have a really good idea and I might be able to test concept, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody heard it, did it really fall, right? That's the question. The reality is, I could have the best pie in the world. If nobody knows about it, nobody's going to be eating pie. It's kind of irrelevant that I have a good pie. So the marketing strategy is important. Then you're looking at business analysis, and that's everything from where am I going to sell it? What am I going to price it at? How am I going to promote it? What are the potential sales? Who am I going to promote it to? So it's whole kind of business analysis. Then after you look at that, you really want to fine tune the product, right? You really want to kind of do some testing and really fine tune the product, and based on the feedback that you would have gotten, then you take it to market. And this is a test market. And there's certain markets like San Francisco that are really good test markets for product development, because people in the Bay Area are much more open to trying new things than people in other parts of the United States. And so that makes it a very attractive marketplace to test things out. And then after you do that initial test run, then you can go to commercialization of the product. So when we're talking about idea generation, remember that you can generate ideas from your R&D department. You can also generate ideas externally based on competitors, based on trends in the market, etc., etc. Then you screen out. We talked about dropping bad ideas, really beefing up and collecting your really good ones. Then you want to test with potential audiences. Sometimes companies do focus groups at this stage to try to get a sense of what is working, what people like, what people don't like. Then you do the development and marketing strategy, and we talked about that 4Ps. Then you look at prototype, you look at sales projections in the development process, test market, commercialization. So I want to talk a little bit about the stages of the PLC, product life cycle, because this is so important to really get a sense and understand where a product is in its development. And then we will need to match our marketing strategy to where the product is in its development. So the product is still at the development stage, research stage. We're investing heavily in it. And a lot of people don't know about it. So we really have to ramp up on getting the word out very, very quickly once we introduce it. And some companies, they do like teasers, think of it like a trailer, right? The trailer hasn't been released as yet, but we hyping it up before it releases, right? So during product development stage, as you're developing, not too early, but as you're developing, you might start looking at, okay, so what is our marketing strategy? Once you start introducing the product, depending again on the nature of the product, then you really want to even ramp up further your advertising efforts. You need to get the word out there about your product. And also now keep in mind, products have a life cycle, industries have a life cycle, product categories have a life cycle. And sometimes industries go through a particular type of life cycle, and then they evolve and they move to something else. So think of Motown. Think of what Motown was like as a product, where you had all these artists, and so much of it was dependent on who their manager was and where they were placed, and these kind of radio live events, and radio was really promoting what people listen to, and you heard things on the radio first, then you really got into it, and so radio was king, and you really needed this entity of Motown to get the word out and to build up the star. And if you were a black artist and you were Motown, you were guaranteed success. And so think of the kind of hype they would use with you while you were in the introduction and growth stages. And then think about when you're in the maturity stage. So, let's use Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson, as he's a little kid and he's with the Jackson 5 and then all that promotion, and then as he matures and he comes to young adults, and then you have all these really great albums that he brings out, and then he starts to go into that maturity where he's no longer making so much new music, but ever once in a while. And people might say, oh God, why is she using Michael Jackson? Because a lot of young artists now are still in the introduction or growth stage. So I need to give you an example of an artist who does really run the gamut, right? But some artists, even as they have reached into the growth and maturity stage, they're able to revamp. They're able to come back. Like, I would think Beyonce is a good example, another good example of, in the introduction stage, she was a part of Destiny's Child. At the maturity, she was bringing out her Lemonade kind of album and so forth and so on. Now, I don't want to say the queen is in decline, but I don't know if she's certainly not bringing out new music in a rapid succession like she was a few years ago. Then we think of newer, younger artists and how very different they rise to fame. Chance the Rapper, very different story, not even being dependent on any kind of Mongol or any kind of studio to hype their music. And I think that is just a completely different model now in the age of social media that allow people to kind of own their own brand. When we look at Cardi B and the relationship she has with her followers on Instagram, how different she's able to manage her brand. And when you even Taylor Swift started off very much owned by the studios, owned by the recording studios, but now Taylor Swift is one of the most savvy businesswomen out there, and I think she owns most of her masters and so forth and so on. Masters meaning the masters of the music, So when you are at different stages, then how you approach the business, how you approach your publicity is very, very different. The things that you will see Chance the Rapper do, things that you will see Cardi B doing, it's going to be a very different approach for people who are much more mature, for your Beyoncés or even your Rihannas and so forth and so on. So depending on where you are in the product life cycle, your profits differ, your expenditure on brand differs. And then you have to also remember there are things like, fashions and fads, and that will dictate how quick your rise and fall is in the product life cycles. And also, remember I talked about industries and categories also have product life cycles. So there was a time where everybody had a CD player. Everybody and their brother had a CD player, right? There was a time where everybody had a Walkman. I remember when I was in school, if you had a pink Walkman, you were the thing. I mean, you were slaying. Now, God help you, I saw a gentleman in the gym a few years ago with a Discman, and the only thing I felt for him was absolute sorrow and pity, right? Because who in these times is going to the gym of all places, holding your Discman as you work out? I mean, it's sad. It really was sad. So I have a friend who said he was checking this girl until he saw her pull out a BlackBerry, and he was like, that's an epic fail. There's no way I can be seen going on with someone who still carries a BlackBerry in 2020. So I just, it all depends on the individual, and I thought I was hysterical. But where you have product life cycles for industries, for categories, and for individual products. So you have to think about, what you do under product development, how because you don't have any sales, but you have a lot of expenses because it's expensive to develop a product. And particularly when we think of companies that, like pharmaceuticals, for example, they spend a lot of money, and high tech companies too. Apple, can you imagine the amount of money that Apple is spending when we're talking about um, developing their brand? It's spending a lot of money, right? So the idea of not making any money in this stage, but spending a lot is something that is important. You're in negative profits. And depending on the product, you might not have a lot of competition, but you're not making any money. Then you move on to your introduction stage where you're gonna have to do a lot of heavy spending on the marketing front because you gotta get the word out, and you want to make sure you get those early adopters so they can give you feedback and you can revise and revamp and so forth and so on. Then you have your growth, and you're really trying to outgrow the competition, outpace them, make as many strides, gain as many customers, and even get a loyal backing and so forth and so on. Um, and we can think of companies and different products and even categories of business, categories of products that are new. And I would say, how many people are trying to buy an iPod right now? That probably is in the maturity and decline. I mean, I don't know how many people are like, man, I gotta get an iPod. Really, that's not happening. That's not a big seller. But how many people? The iPhone has been sturdy. The iPhone has been consistent, right? They have maintained it. I don't know about the iPad. I would say probably it's in the mature stage now because I don't know how many new customers they are getting outside of young children coming on the market. But I think everybody who's going to have an iPad has an iPad, except for younger generations. So they might really, people who are, because every child that is within a certain price category in terms of background, income bracket, you're going to see the kids with some kind of device, right? So once we're talking about within their target market, everybody in the world clearly does not have an iPad. But within their audience, within their ideal target market, have they kind of saturated that market? I don't know. But it's certainly not in the introduction stage, right? And so when you're at the growth, you're really trying to grow, grow, grow. You're extending warranties, you're extending marketing, you're trying to sell a lot. Then in maturity, you really peak. And that's why I'm saying I don't know if iPad is at its peak just yet, but it might be coming up close. I don't think iPhone is at its peak because I think the good thing about iPhone is two things. That's why they have to constantly be re-upping it, right? Constantly be reinventing and coming up with new versions. Because if they didn't, then a long time ago, people would stop buying it because, like, what's new? What's different, right? So that is also a consideration. What else? Then we start to talk about in decline. There's some artists that are solidly in decline, but I don't think they got a memo, and I don't think they know us yet. Um, and that can be kind of sad. But then your approach is completely different when you're at that stage. When you're in the maturity stage, then you're still advertising because you want to, sell as much on the end that you can, but you know that decline is coming. And once you get to decline, then the last people who are going to adopt you start adopting you. So imagine in 2020, there's still people buying a flip phone. There are still sales of flip phone happening every single day. So just because you're declining doesn't mean there are zero sales. It just means your sales are on the decline. And so maybe your only people that are really buying new products are your loyal customers. No one is trying a flip phone for the first time in 2020, but there are people who've had a flip phone before and they are comfortable with it and are buying a new one in 2020. So that's the difference, right? And then we have to recognize that our strategies for each stage differs. You cannot use the same strategy for your product that's in decline as you would for your product that is at the introduction stage. So it's important when you're doing your projects to think about which stage your product is on that life cycle and then choose appropriate strategies to match where they are. See you guys in chapter 10.